What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ladies Who Bronché, the podcast where we have all the conversations at the brunch table that people say you shouldn't have at the dinner table, but at the brunch table, baby, anything goes. And this week, I am especially excited to bring this guest into the fold because we love money. We always want to make more. We always want to spend more. We certainly maybe spend more than we should at our brunches sometimes. And I realized that over the years that Bronche has been around, we haven't ever seriously talked about money. And back in 2023, after a transition out of a startup that I was working at, where I was one of the founding members, I found myself at this juncture where I was like, holy shit, what is going to happen with me and my money? Where I felt confident in my life path, my journey, my passions, and all these other things, I realized that there was a wobble in my wealth management and the ways in which I can visualize that. And the person who sort of I had that aha moment with was Anna because she gave this speech, and I think that both because yes, she is a woman, a Black woman of Latina descent as well, there was certain things that she was touching on that I was just kind of like, oh damn, oh yeah, that's me. And I realized that it was the moment to either feel a lot of shame about what was true about where I was at, or it was the moment to be like, all right, well, time to buckle up and take your financial life seriously in a completely different way. And I wanted her to bring that magic and that go getter energy to you all this week. So, Anna, tell us, who the fuck are you?
Oh my gosh, Julissa, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. I'm really excited for this conversation. So, my name is Anna N'Jie-Konte. I am the CEO and founder of a boutique wealth management firm called Poder Wealth Advisors. We focus on working with women, executives, folks who work at startups, and entrepreneurs in managing their money in an aligned way, using money to live their best life. But at the end of the day, that's like my LinkedIn version. The real version is I'm a half Puerto Rican, half Gambian girl, first gen, grew up in New York City, with all of the things that comes with a lot of financial woes, a lot of scraped knees when it comes to finances. And I'm someone who is really passionate about our community getting our shit together, because I know that the reason that I have been able to have my shit together is because I learned these skills through my professional life. And so my goal is to destigmatize money conversations to help Latinas and women of color do better financially, and for us to stop doing the most and do the things that really light us up and that bring us purpose and are really aligned with who we are and what we want to be. And also
Absolutely.
stop traumatizing our kids because that's also part of it.
Part of what really struck me in your talk at that event, which shout out to We All Grow Latina and everybody on that team, like was this idea that we get into mindsets that are planted in us like without our consent, right? This idea of what wealth management looks like, what it can or cannot look like for people who look like us, right? Even when we're in the thick of becoming the rising star, seeing our income shift, there is this lack of faith in that process that allows for us to show up in ways that don't help the process at all because it's almost like we don't take ourselves seriously, not because a part of us doesn't want to, but because we haven't necessarily had that modeled in a way. And what we had modeled, or at least for myself, is the activated money wound, which we will talk about more later on. But that really kind of fucked me up. And I inherited a lot of it from my parents, and God bless them. They've done all they could. They're amazing people. They too, being immigrants, you know what I mean? Like we're coming in and trying to figure things out, but we have such a different opportunity for growth and change. And I think it begins in that mindset piece before you even start looking at numbers.
100%. And I will say, like, from my own journey, I think the thing that really shifted for me was like, see, I used to see myself, and a lot of the messaging I had as a young person was seeing myself as separate from money, right? Like I'm over here and the money and the people that have money are over there. And part of that was a reality, right? Like we did not have a lot of money, but there was also, even for my family members that had achieved like what I would call solid lower middle class, like they bought a house in Long Island and they had a car and they weren't paycheck to paycheck, right? Like they made it. Even those ones, all I would hear from them was, nosotros somos gente pobre. Nosotros somos pobres, esa cosa de rico, nosotros no hacemos eso. And it was like, oh, there's things that we do. And that is, and my identity being from my community is tied into how much money we have. And that was something that I didn't really realize until I had been in the business for a couple years, because what I saw was there were people, yes, there were the people that were like multi-generational wealthy and had, 100, $200 million in a portfolio, and they were born into wealth. But there were lots of people that I worked with who they just had a solid like white collar job and saved really well consistently over decades. And then they had two, three, $4 million. And that was what helped bridge that gap. So I didn't see myself as being separate from that. And I was like, okay, let me look at what are the things I need to do in order to go from point A to point B, even if I never become a music star. Like, I don't have musical talent. I'm a decent athlete, but I was not going to go to professional sports. And so I had to figure out a way to bridge that gap for myself.
I love that reality of being able to say, what is my actual path and what are the bridges I need? And sometimes we do have to seek that out. It isn't in our immediate range of accessibility. But sometimes what we also don't realize is that in our immediate circles, if we're not having these conversations around wealth management, you don't know what people are doing. People aren't necessarily sharing their tips and tricks. And even if you're not sitting in a room with a bunch of billionaires, that doesn't mean there isn't somebody with a solid plan who knows how to budget, who knows how to take advantage of benefits that their job may be offering. Like, I remember the first time somebody was like 401k, the first thing I thought, and I was, in my early 20s, I was like, oh, that's for old people, right? Like, I didn't stop to ask anybody what it really was. I was just like, oh, I hear old people talking about that. That doesn't apply to me. I don't need to worry about the 401k. Fast forward to now, I'm like, oh, snap. Like, let me look up to see, did I actually opt in? Like, shit, like, what did I do with that? Because I'm beginning to understand that seeing myself as separate from benefits and opportunities that were aligning with me in particular moments was really going to hurt me in the long run. But every lesson, every rejection is, again, just an opportunity to bounce back up and start anew. So before we keep talking about money, I want to pivot to brunch for a moment. So I would love, Anna, if you would share with us, what is your favorite brunch plate and drink?
Okay. I really love spicy anything. So I would say like a good chilaquiles is my jam, like my jam. You just has a very special place in my heart. Shout out to our Mexican primos who came up with that because it's just 10 out of 10. No notes. Um Drink, I would say I love a Bloody Mary. I love a Bloody Mary.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I'm not
Also,
really the gang. I'm like, give me the real stuff.
yeah, the hardcore stuff. I love it. So tell me a little bit about what bochinche, if you will, you like to discuss over a meal.
I mean, there's so many. One of them is usually like, the well, okay, I'm gonna tell you the real stuff. So
Yeah.
one of I have some gay friends who have recently told me that they think that most men, like more than half of men are gay or
Yeah.
like are gay adjacent. And
Mhm.
so the latest topic has been how many of these men that we see here do we think that they've played and they're pretending that they haven't?
Mhm.
That's been,
Mhm.
and I know that's very random, but that's very real.
No, it's not random. I mean, for the Bronche audience, like, you know that that is actually very on brand. I do think that we have, like, culturally hit this precipice where there is more acceptance, but also more curiosity of like, wait, if there's been all of these illusions we've had around cis relationships, what are the things that are happening beneath the surface? And like, whether or not that means that people are open to holding space for that or not, I think it is interesting to really realize, holy shit, we've all been playing fantasy with each other to keep a cis heteronormative framework, but
Yeah.
that's not what's happening. So, like, what is
No.
actually going on?
And to be honest, I'm all about like being honest with ourselves and not playing small and not like jugando ese papel that our parents or our family or our culture or our country, like whatever dominant society has taught us to do. So if baby, like live your best life, be with who you want to be with. You know what I mean? I'm mostly like, what are we doing in this our year of 2025? Why
Yes.
are we pretending? So
Yeah, 100%.
it
I love
comes
that.
from that energy.
100%. And shout out to all our queer friends who bring the real conversations to the table. The next question is, what was it like going out to eat when you were growing up as a kid? What was the culture of eating out, if you were even going out at all?
I mean, we weren't really.
Yeah, that was
Like
also my case.
like, we weren't. I mean, okay, so maybe there was a McDonald's when mommy was tired. Um, there was occasionally, like, Chinese food ordered in. There was sometimes Red Lobster. Like, that
It's
was, like,
a
it's
big
somebody's
deal.
birthday, okay? It's somebody's birthday, but to be frank, it really wasn't frequent. It was so infrequent, and, it's the same thing. I mean, truly, I come from a family where people cook really well, and I also was very fortunate that, while my mom and dad worked a lot when I was growing up, I had my grandmother and my aunt and uncle who were older than my mom that were, like, on the tail end of their career or already retired. So they were around, they were home, and we lived in a multi-generational household. So, like, había comida en casa because mama made arroz con habichuela this morning. So there's no need for McDonald's. You know what I mean? Mama fried up some chicken before I came home from school. I don't need to be eating out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love that our culture is really, especially the intergenerational aspect, when you are in a community where you have those generations where, maybe my parent was working, but there's a grandparent in the household that can
Yeah,
really step in. And all of those things are part of self care. I think, I know I had a moment growing up where it was like, damn, I hated having to wait for the special occasions. But that only started to shift for me so I went to LaGuardia Performing Arts High School in New York City and was a drama kid. And it was the first time that I was in school with kids who were white, just to be frank, right? And who also had different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so some of these kids were living right in Columbus Circle near our school and shit like that, which in New York, I was like, whoa, people
yeah.
do live
People
here
live
and you're
here.
one of them? That's crazy, right? And so, like, I remember having this moment of frustration of like, damn, why can't we? Why can't we? And now, hindsight is 2020. Like, as an adult, I'm like, wow, I really wish I had an abuela busted something down in this kitchen and I can pull away from
Totally.
this Zoom. You know what I mean? It's
Like,
such a, it's
somebody made me something delicious and I didn't have to do it or pay for it, baby.
100%, and so when we do think about wealth, I think about those markers of wealth that aren't tied to money necessarily, but when you look at the mindset of what it provides, how it frees up your time, how it pours into your cup, that when we look at wealth, that's also part of the goals that we want to integrate to how we're building our wealth is like, yes, there is the numerical, factual data points that are what they are, period. And you have to follow that. And then there are the ways in which your mindset can align to what that looks like for you so that in moments where the wealth isn't like accelerating at these crazy rates, but you can see other measures of success along the way, you can still consider it a win towards the building of your wealth. Not eating out and having that really made me richer than I realized I was back.
100%. Because you know what it's like to walk into a house and smell something delicious and hear people talking, like, and have, like, that warmth versus, you know I mean, and no shade, no shade, like, everybody gets to live their own way, but to your point, I think that is realizing how blessed and how abundant and how fortunate we are to have had that experience even in America is a huge part of, like, what I like to focus my energy on. It's like, yes, I didn't have a lot materially, but I had a whole lot in another way.
I love that. I love that. So let's move into our cheers section where we shout out dope people, brands, and orgs doing dope shit. And you had put this post talking about exit plan for women founders. And as I was listening to it, as somebody who knows so many women founders and actually is I'm a community manager of this group list. And I realized that in having that intimate look into the kinds of struggles and things that these women are going through on a day to day, that this idea of exit plan is something that, like, in the go getterness of trying to set things up, people don't always think about that, but that there is value in talking about it, even if it wasn't part of your initial vision, because there is power in the exit plan and in having a sense of control and clarity around what that can look like for you. So I just want to say shout out to the women founders who are right now thinking about exit strategies, because while we think about legacy and tie that to longevity, sometimes the longevity we tie it to includes us being at the forefront and always being the one burning the midnight oil. And sometimes, just like when you raise your kids and the time comes that it is their time, that can also be true for the businesses that we build and the teams that join us along that journey. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts around that, the exit plans, things that you learned, being in conversation with other women founders who are at that precipice.
I love talking about exit planning because I think that a lot of us, we have this, like, once again, like, either it's really big or it's nothing. Kind of, we have this all or nothing mentality. And I think that women have like, we're starting businesses at a disproportionately high rate. And we have the tools and the skills and the natural abilities to be really successful in business. But a lot of us play very small in that we pay ourselves too little, we charge too little, and we don't think about that we're building a business that could be a sellable asset. We're thinking of it as like a replacement of income. And I always encourage my clients to think about, even if they have no plans of selling, even if it's a solo business, like regardless of what their plans are, because it's going to vary woman to woman, business model to business model. I encourage them to plan with the exit in mind. And what I mean by that is thinking about how are we structuring this business to be really healthy, having a healthy profit margin, not solely dependent on you as the founder to execute and operate, having good standard operating procedures, having good financial controls. Like, all of those are, once again, having solid cash flow. Um, all of those are having good contracts, good legal structure, like having those things done really well, and the foundational, really boring things. If you set your business up for that, that could be an incredible asset for another woman to take over and have that be her business, or for a strategic buyer. And you'd be surprised at, you can get payouts for things that you might not necessarily have thought about would be like something that somebody could buy, whether it's a consulting practice, whether it's, a nail salon. Like, one of the women that talked on that panel that I attended, or like that session I attended this week. She was a Latina, a fellow Latina. She had been working on Wall Street. She bought a nail salon, which is totally different than what she was doing. She didn't have any cosmetology, any background. She bought a failing nail salon that was literally about to close its doors. She flipped that baby around in 2 years and had a seven-figure exit. And those are businesses that we're doing right now, but it takes you thinking about, I'm buying this and I'm doing this in a professional way so that it could be an asset. And truly, she probably could have held it for a couple of years and just been taking that cash flow, because once again, she wasn't in the business doing the nails. She wasn't doing that. And I think it can be a life-changing amount of money. Instead of thinking about, like, this old way of thinking about, I start a business and I work for 40 years. Like, how many of our parents and relatives do that? Whether that be cleaning houses or landscaping or having a restaurant, or, whatever the thing is, like mechanic stuff, auto mechanics, we do that. And we're not setting ourselves up for having that, like, life-changing amount of wealth in the future.
Yeah, I think that that is such a strong point, right? Is that's we think, and I think this is tied to the mindset of being so responsible for your own wealth and money that if your hands aren't on it, then like it can't happen. And I think sometimes we think of manifestation in certain areas as more hands on than the manifestation actually calls for. That actually, when you have that vision and you open yourself up to say, okay, I want to learn all of the different avenues with which I can make this goal come to life, and then allow yourself to discover something that might shift the perspective that you assumed and lean into it rather than assume that that's not for you, or assume, oh, well, who will want to buy a business from me? again, that mindset shift really being a key component in how you build things from the beginning, which is why, like, depending on who you are, you either like to hit the ground running and learn as you go, or you're one of those people who overthinks and tries to front load all the information because you're trying not to make mistakes along the way. But the truth is, on both roads, there are mistakes that will be made. There are lessons and bumps that are going to come along. But if you understand the energetic function that you need for that ultimate goal, then like, yeah, you can reach that. And so, yeah, you can say, I don't know shit about nails outside of sitting down and letting somebody handle them. But I do understand the culture of this space. I understand what a turnaround can look like. I can also understand as a consumer, what are some of the trends or even just personal touches that will make the difference in a community where this is based that will elevate this to the next level. And sometimes that's all you need in order to create a plan that will really succeed and thrive, and you could get paid for in a completely different way.
100%. And I would just say one of the things I tell people all the time is so many of us have really solid skills that we get from corporate, whether that be marketing or sales or operations or finance, like whatever our skill set is, we have those and we've learned in corporate. So why wouldn't you, if you are so inclined, think about how do I bring that corporate mindset to a business and structure this business so that it's an asset for me. We play really small, we think really small. And once you start to get exposed to these money conversations and these higher level things, it just shifts your perspective and you start to, it's like somebody putting on glasses. Like it just, you see things in a much different way. And like the whole game is how are we turning our income into assets? And a lot of us go directly to like real estate, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Like there are so many other avenues that we can take to buy ourselves that financial freedom and once again leverage our skills in a way that gives us the financial security and abundance I know a lot of us are looking for.
Yeah, I love that. So I'd love to hear if there's anything you would like to shout out this week.
Yeah. Um oh my gosh, there's so many, but I would say like right now there's this business coach that I follow on, and she's coached me in different aspects over the years that I follow on Instagram. Her name is Simone Soul. And Simone is talking a lot about how women and people of color need to come back home to a lot of our traditional like values and operate within that. And it's just a message that I have really felt for years, but she's just been lighting us up lately. And I love that.
I love that. What are some of the, like, one of your favorite sort of practices or mindsets that she's talked about lately?
Yeah. I think one of the things that she's talked about is recognizing how our business should be rooted in our cultural values and in the aspects that like traditions and frameworks and ways of thinking about things that we have been imparted on us by our culture, right? So in my case, one of the things I've been thinking about is like culturally, I was always taught that like we're supposed to take care of each other. And while money might be mine, like I may be the person that's earning it, it's more collective. And it's not and not that it's collective, but I have a responsibility to my family and to my community that comes through that. Whereas like capitalism teaches us you just earn your money and you live your best life and you enjoy. And that's a message that she's been sharing a lot too is like you have a responsibility and that's actually really freeing and exciting. It's like who are you accountable to?
What I really picked up on in the startup space was a lot of these founders are a lot of the people who really have the grit to survive all of these rounds of trying to get investors, and it's not an easy journey.
Oh, it's really hard.
Very hard, and I find that some of the most successful people are the people who understand that while they are at the will of the market and what's trendy and what investors are really looking for, when they are clear about the passion points and the points of integrity that matter to their business, when they speak to that with that true authenticity, sometimes that's what gets them the money. That is actually at
Whoa.
the root. what helps them shine and helps others see, whoa, they're built different. Whoa, yes, this is a product that exists in the world in some way, shape, or form, but this is going to excel because of the way this person is thinking about community sometimes, right? Which is again like not a function of, we have to uplift everyone. And so we have to hand out all the discounts and do all the hand holding that sometimes we assume is the best way to serve community, but is actually like, here's a clear vision that I have for what that looks like that serves us all in the ways in which we can grow past old ways of what it looks like to be an impact driven business. And that's really my bread and butter. So my bread and butter and expertise around businesses is to help founders get to that point of like, no, what is actual impact? How do you measure that? And how are you not just sticking with the age old, I love my community? And it's like, yes, and love sometimes is being tough and being like, yeah, I can't be the one to give you that discount, but here's what I can do. Here are the other ways that I can offer valuable things. And the ones who get it. And the ones who don't. And also separating yourself from that responsibility and guilt of the fact that not everyone is going to feel like that is enough for them to engage you. But you kind of got to stay where you're at in order to still stay focused on your long term goals and the success of the business.
Oh my God, I'm picking up what you're putting down, girl, because the thing that I hate most is this self-sacrificing martyrdom thing that a lot of us that care about our community and care about our people and want to do good and maybe start a business with an eye for service and an eye for impact, like they do this whole thing where like they put themselves in a precarious financial position, and I'm like, you're not helping anybody by doing that, by giving everybody and their mama a discount, by having accessible pricing. Listen, I get why people do that. I'm not, but the real truth is that accessible pricing and the tier pricing and doing all of that oftentimes is a it's like a self-perpetuating cycle of like, now you don't even have enough money to pay for the things that you need and to pay people enough and to actually do the job well or create that wealth for yourself so that you can be more of a blessing to people.
Where you put your attention is where the intention will flow. And if you're spending more time trying to figure out how to allow people to access your business at a lower price point because you want to feel like, let's be honest, some people do it because they think it makes them look like a better human, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I don't,
Valid.
because, and especially when they are, let's say, non-white, right? Like they're like, oh, well, if I don't do that, then I'm just going to look like a sellout. When in reality, one, our culture and our people are already devotees to brands and companies that have never had that thought,
Yeah.
right? And
Never
never
run a sale.
you know and like and they show up and we get to, I think, part of breaking generational curses, and we talk about it, and people always talk about generational wealth as breaking one of those curses. It's not just the numbers that breaks that curse. It really is how you're willing to stand, 10 toes down on what your money needs and how it needs to work for you, because you can express that wealth sharing in other ways, like giving your time or saying, you know what, I can't have X amount of clients, but I commit to, once a quarter, or I will have like 5 different people who I will give a free hour of like advisement to, because that is going to be my way to support those people. There's so many ways to remix it, but I think that immediately the idea that money is the entry point that blocks people, so that is where we need to make the adjustment, is something that we kind of need to shift away
100%. 100%. And also, the last thing I would say is you don't know what people got. You don't know what people got. Because, I mean, this is like one of those limiting mindsets that we have around money is we think, especially if we are coming from like the Latino community, and if you're serving Latinos, you're like, oh, I can't charge too much because we don't got that much. You don't know what people got. Some people got it. And sometimes when people got it, they're not going to look like they got it, or they're, even if they don't got it, they're going to figure out how to get it to make it work because they value the service or the thing that you're offering them enough to figure it out. Because one thing we're going to do is be resourceful.
that part, make your business show its value and resource, so that when people look at the price tag, their first thought isn't to devalue the business, but to ask themselves, how do I, as me and my friends like to say, step your pussy game up to meet it. How are you meeting them where
Yeah.
they're at, because you're like, no, this actually matches where I'm trying to go, and though it is an investment, it's a worthwhile investment. Let them know how it is a worthwhile investment. Speaking of some of these culture, we're going to move into our tuta loca section where we shout out motherfuckers who are doing the most. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of this. The culture of mattress money, if you will, that we're going to take money and we're not going to put it in institutions, in banks, and in other places because we're worried about what can happen to it. But we're also not thinking about not even just like the ways that we are missing out on that money growing in other ways, but how even the act of hiding it under the mattress above anything else robs us of the opportunity of expanding our financial learnings, our financial literacy in a way where when we are willing to put our money in spaces because the same reason we're putting it under the mattress because we want to be careful about it, understand what you're getting yourself into, understand what are the risks and possible rewards in where you're placing your money. One of the things that I have been healing shame around is like how by the time I started making money, I really did not know what to do with my money. And I think that I was relying on the ways in which my life was like just even a couple percentage points better than it was before, wasn't in poverty. I'm a kid who grew up Section 8, food stamps, the whole nine, right? So, like, to me, being like, oh, yeah, I'm making enough money that I don't even qualify for that kind of stuff. And that feeling, like, in itself, like a marker, but then also not being like, all right, and then what? And how do you grow what you have in a way? Because in my head, even though it was more money, it wasn't the same amount of money as the billionaires that were running WeWork. So I was like, man, I'm probably never going to touch that. So let me just enjoy what I got here without thinking about growing it. And so I'd love to hear from you a little bit about how, whether it's cultural mindsets or even if it's not tied to cultures, but just people's perceptions around money and mattress money, if you will, that has really harmed us and made it more difficult for more people from our community to see themselves in positions of power and wealth.
Yeah. I think it's all about fear and thinking small. Like I know I've said that multiple times, but I think that's really it. And there are very real reasons for that. But I also think that we live it's 2025 and the internet exists and there is an abundance of information out there about how you can take the next steps. And at the same time I have empathy for it because you look at a 401k sign up at work and you're just like, I don't know what any of this means, right? Like this is just completely a different language. You go to a financial institution and you just have no idea what's going on and what people are talking about. And my industry in particular is very bad about talking to people in jargon. So even if you look for support, I remember, I had this conversation at a brunch maybe last year with this woman who is very educated, in her late 20s, and her mom got a settlement from work. And she's like, I go for mommy because mommy doesn't speak English. I go for mommy and I talk to this guy and I went to college and I'm a smart person and I work in corporate. Y yo salgo con lágrimas en los ojos. She was like, I leave there crying and feeling so like ashamed because I don't understand anything this man is saying. And I'm like, it's not you, it's actually us sometimes. And having said that, at the same time, like holding space for that, we're not doing ourselves any favors. And there's a real opportunity cost for playing small and thinking small. And it's a perpetual cycle of, if you come from a financially disenfranchised or like disadvantaged background, and then you continue to play small, not invest your money, not grow your money, not think strategically about your finances and what you're trying to build. And then you just think, oh, I've made it, right? You're going to continue to be in that situation where you're just like one step away from everything coming crumbling down around you. And that's what our parents literally left their countries for. That's what we've been working so hard to avoid. And we're perpetuating that. It's just at a different level. And I would argue that, when you've had a taste of life when it's not complete struggle and when there is extra and things feel comfortable and then some shit goes left on you and then you're left at another and then you got to come back down, that's more painful and that's worse, right? And I think it's our responsibility for us that have the resources and have the education and have the knowledge to do better, right? So I always tell folks, yes, you can think about what could go wrong, what que si esto pasa, what happens with this, what happens with that, and what happens when you don't do anything, right? So you keep your money in the mattress, you keep your money in a shoebox in the garage, you just leave it in a checking account because you don't know what to do. And I will tell you, I see this, Julissa, all the time. Women will come to me, they literally have $300,000 in a bank account. $500,000 in a bank account at Bank of America or Chase or whatever. And I'm like, one, you're earning 0.00 nothing on that. And so that money's not growing. You're losing money because inflation, the cost of goods, we all know things are expensive. Things keep getting more expensive. Things are more expensive. So that whatever that amount is you have in your bank account is losing value over time. And the market has been gangbusters for a very long time. And so, year to date, the market's been up almost 20%. And so you've also missed out on that upside, right? And that's a cycle that continues to perpetuate. So I'm just not about that. Like, you can be scared and I'm gonna push you and be like, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is those changes in practices that make all the difference, even when you're starting small. I think there are people, and I include myself in this category of people, of having to shift the mindset of, okay, you have to start somewhere. I am not where I was before financially, but if I don't start taking seriously the money I have now and learning those practices, then when the real money comes in, that's when I want to start, when the risk is higher, when I'm talking
Yep.
about big figures, it's like, no, it's almost like como una dieta, right? Like, it's like, okay, maybe you're not ready for the full blown, like, wake up 5 a.m., do that hardcore CrossFit training, but if you're not even taking, let's say, a 30-minute brisk walk daily, like, you're going to tell me you're not going to take 30-minute brisk walks and then expect one day to be ready to turn on your CrossFit body? Like, you have to start
It
somewhere.
makes
And
sense.
so I think that I say this to myself and to others who are listening, who are probably like, "Oh, girl, this conversation, I'm only making X amount of money a year." Like, don't do that. Like, that is already mistake number one, is to pull yourself away from the pathways of meaningful change towards your wealth. Which also brings us into our plate of the day, which is really like money talks. Like, we need to be talking about money at all levels. And I think that oftentimes what happens is we'll either hear conversations where we have people on the lower end of the bracket, and so we have like tangible tips and tools that people are hearing about budgeting, and you have people depriving themselves of el cafecito that they like from whatever coffee shop. And these people aren't necessarily privy to the conversations that are happening with, let's say, the women founders and people who are bringing in wealth, who this year, what I learned from being in that community and hearing some of the conversations was the ways in which, even when you get the money, again, and I keep saying this, when you don't have the mindset and you're not prepared in a certain way, the way the markets were fluctuating for people, the way that there were many women founders who I knew whose businesses were built on things like DEI or other intersections that started to get demonized this year. And then suddenly they were losing major contracts left and right. So I've seen a lot of people who had already, quote unquote, made it, who were then having to have some of these conversations and hearing some of the tidbits and being like, wow, this sounds a lot like the girl who is being told not to spend her $7 on her latte, but in a different context. And so it really, not in a way that I was happy to see anybody going through anything, but it made me feel like, oh, okay, you're not so far away from being somebody who can manage lots of wealth if your mindset is prepared for when that money comes. So I would love to hear, just from your perspective, what are some of the common myths in the financial space and people who are entering big money that you see that sets people up for failure without them even knowing it?
Well, there's so many, but I would say one, like, you have to have a lot of money like, we have this weird habit, regardless of where you are income wise, of having these mental anchors to dollar figures that are not tied to reality. So people will be like, when I hit six figures, I'll do that. When I have this amount of money in the bank, then I'll do that. When I hit this, then I'll do that. And it's like, those are, those may be the numbers, but likely they're not, because you're just pulling those numbers out of thin air. And it's usually about some story we have from our past, from our childhood, from our young adult years that is tied to that. And so, or what we arbitrarily think is like a good amount. And I would just say, you know, anchor any financial decisions you have in actual numbers, regardless of what income level you're at. The other thing that I really hate it, is like this, the things the wealthy are not telling you, right? Yes, there are like tax codes, tax rules, investment strategies, blah blah blah. There are things like that out there, but in my experience over the last 15 years of like working with really wealthy people, I think that the thing that they do best, they do better, is they think about opportunity costs and they think long term. They're not thinking about how can I get what's that audio like I need to get this money by tomorrow, right? Like they're
Yeah.
not thinking about that. They're thinking about how is this going to work 5 years from now? How is this what do I need to do so that I'm in a good place 10 years from now? Not how am I going to be good 5 months from now? And I think the more that we can think long range and the more that we can darle tiempo al tiempo, like let things marinate, let things grow and not focus on the day-to-day fluctuations, the more successful we're going to be, right? If you can get in the process of planning long term and looking at the numbers long term, you're going to be in a great position. Like that's actually the key, like the wealth key is giving things time, assigning a realistic timeline, having realistic numbers, having a realistic perspective, but also like knowing that the 10 or 15 or 25-year vision needs to be big as hell. It needs to be big. And then you need to back into what are the little steps I need to take today to get to that big vision.
When we are trying to think big, there are those of us who are like, okay, I want to think big, but realistically. And then
Mhm.
we do start to limit ourselves. And again, this is for like the big long term vision. It's certainly helpful to be realistic in the short term, but like that long term vision, including what we were talking about, like even with exit plans, understanding what it is that I'm really trying to do with this space is important. And it's better than sort of allowing analysis paralysis to keep you stuck and not really making decisions that are going to move you in either direction. I'm curious if there are any like trends or things that you see regurgitated over and over again that are either, I don't want to say not true, but maybe aren't being explained to the extent that people understand. Yes, that sounds like a quick fix, but also here's some more context where that's not all that glitters is gold.
Yeah. Ooh, girl, I could talk about this for days. I mean, I have so much smoke for financial advisors and then also like candidly financial influencers because I think you have to know at what stage you're operating in your financial journey and then use discernment and find the appropriate person at that level, right? So I'll give you an example. On the low end, low meaning like starting out end, there's a lot of financial influencers that, maybe they paid off some debt or maybe they had something that they figured out. And so they have converted that into a platform for like on social media, maybe they do coaching, maybe they have courses or whatever it is. I think that has a place for some people, but I think you need to understand that those people don't actually have like a knowledge fundamental foundation to what they're teaching you, and it's only going to get you so far. All right, so if you're just starting out and you got a bunch of debt and you're trying to figure out how to budget and you have no idea how to invest whatsoever, that can be a solid place to start, but I would say don't stay there. Now, on the other end, once people start to get to a point where like they have some money, or maybe they have stock options and maybe they have like some complexity to their financial situation, most people, rightfully so, will seek out a financial advisor. And, not all that glitters is gold. Not everybody that calls themselves a financial advisor is actually like a financial advisor. And actually, I have horror stories for days about financial advisors. And I would say, you really need to understand who the person works for and how they're compensated and understand that that may be in conflict with how they're advising you, right? So I know a lot of us, we know somebody that works at some big insurance company, Northwestern Mutual, cough cough, you know what I'm saying? Like we know those people and they as a person might be really well intentioned or they may care about you and like giving you good advice, but the challenge is they're compensated in a certain way. And I would just argue that show me how somebody's compensated and I'm gonna show you how they're gonna act. And so if these are commission based people, well, guess what, baby? They're like the guy on the corner trying to sell you something because they trying to make this money, right? Like they're just going to be like that. They're always like, "Oh, what about this one? What about this one? You want this one? You want that one?" You don't want any of that, and it's because that's how they're compensated, right? So I would just say you really need to be very very careful about who you're following and ask a lot of questions. And this is where ChatGPT and AI can be really helpful. Like if you're thinking about, oh, I want to hire somebody, I want to invest in a course, I want to get a financial advisor, run that. Ask ChatGPT or AI, what are the questions you need to ask? What are the red flags you need to look for? What should they know about so that I'm walking into this in a good way? I know that's a really long-winded answer, but I think social media is like a double-edged sword where there's so much information and there's never been a shortage of information. And at the same time, there's also a lot of charlatanes out there that are just trying to sell you on a hope and a dream. And I will tell you, if there's anybody who's telling you that something's going to be fast or easy, they're full of it. There's nothing in wealth building, business building, entrepreneurship, investing that is just like quick money. There's none of it. None of
Yeah.
it is.
People want to think that there's like an Ozempic for your money, that you're just going to take this injection of something and it's going to do the work that you've been fighting to do all these years but haven't quite hacked. And it's important to know that. And I mean, the amount of times that I've been tempted to, but never quite felt. Thank God for my ancestors and my intuition that doesn't allow for me to just let desperation make decisions of like, join this free webinar. And then the webinar is really the pitch for you to sign on to this thing. But even there, like, the vibe and the energy doesn't feel like one of abundance or of my abundance and my interest. And being able to discern that has kept me from some real tricksters who would have taken my money and I still probably wouldn't have applied many skills, or that what they were giving me was stuff that, like, in an age of chat gpt, if I would have asked the right questions, chat gpt might have told me some of the same basic
Yeah.
fundamental ideals,
Yeah.
which, and I want to honor and respect that, like, knowing your own financial situation does make it so that, like, not everything is a one size fits all, which is what I think also is wonderful about how you run your business. Because as I was digging through and reading through the website, I'm like, okay, there is this idea of really wanting to make sure that how you are going to align people to how they're managing their money or growing their business is the key, is that word alignment. So in the vein of alignment, I'm curious if you could keep it real with us, like, what do you look for in a client? Because it is a two-way
Mm.
street, right? And there
Yeah.
is this reality of knowing, like, hey, if you are just at this particular level, I don't judge you and, like, it's all good. But, like, I am not here for that, not because you're not deserving, but because my focus is in a particular bracket, but also particular mindset. So I would like to hear, what is the ideal client for you to
Yeah.
work?
Thank you. That's a good point. And to kind of where we were talking about earlier, like I started off with a certain client. I started off with people that really needed debt payoff help, that really needed budgeting help, that really needed like the basic frameworks. And I recognized that that was not like the highest and best use of my time. And that has been something I've been over the last couple of years because and I feel very good about it. But there's lots of content creators out there. There's lots of financial coaches. There's ChatGPT, to your point, that can help you with creating a budget or like doing those more basic kind of fundamental things. Um, my best client is somebody who recognizes that they can't know everything and they shouldn't try to know everything, want somebody that's going to help them think intelligently and translate that vision into like practical tangible steps that they can follow now to set their finances and their business up for that ultimate vision. um that's more qualitative. I think somebody who recognizes that it's going to take time, that things are not going to, like, nothing is going to be fixed overnight, it's not going to be a quick fix, and I don't have some magic secret that's going to like change your financial situation overnight. That doesn't exist. Um, from a quantitative standpoint, I usually say folks who have 250,000 of income or 250,000 of assets is a good candidate for me, right? Where they have enough income for us to really move the needle. They have enough um, complexity for us to start to really move things in a positive direction and for us to play and like um get that, like, prime the pump and get things really going.
You don't need to be Jeff Bezos to want to have good wealth management practice.
Not everybody needs an ongoing financial advisor. relationship, like where we're working together year over year forever. Some people do need that, or some people really value that because they want somebody to hold them accountable and to make sure that they stay on track and to continue to help them refine their numbers and make decisions once again with that end goal in mind. Some people want that. Some people are just like, hey, I just need to check and make sure that I'm on the right track. And that's also beautiful and very valid, right? Especially, I find that that comes with, when there's a big income change or there's a big life change and you are at a crossroads and trying to make a decision and want to do it well, right? But at the end of the day, everybody needs a financial plan. The question is, how is that delivered to you? Who's helping you with that? Whether it's something you're doing yourself or something that you're hiring a professional to support you with.
This is the time where a lot of people start thinking about my money, what am I doing this year, how much I want to make. What maybe advice or even perhaps how you are thinking about your wealth management and what goals you're setting, what feels like a reasonable goal or practice or mindset shift or even a book, right, that we could be reading this year that you think would be valuable in setting somebody up who might be in the beginning of this journey of like, you know what, I want to take my wealth management more seriously this year.
I love it. So first of all, I actually just wrote my newsletter for the first of the year today, and I put in there that I hate New Year's resolutions. Like I don't do them. And I think it's a false energy, right? It's a false energy because at the end of the day, nothing is different from December 20th to January 1st to November 20th. There's nothing different. The only thing different is that you are now actually focused on what you want because everybody else around you is what you want. So like I have a lot of smoke for New Year's resolutions.
Yes. Same.
Um but like it's like most people by February they forgot what it is. They're not doing it anymore, and it's because we have this all or nothing mentality, and we really think about goals in a toxic way. I'm much more of like, what is the type of life you want to live, and what is the person that has that type of life, what do they do and how do they move and how do they behave, and learning to think about that and have a relationship with that future person, and continually committing to showing up as that person even before it hasn't happened for you. um but I would say, I think the thing that I'm doing, um, more because it's like a new tax year for myself, is I'm setting um grounded goals for myself because I am an entrepreneur of what are the financial moves that I need to make over the next year to set myself up well. And how do I back into what are the numbers I need to hit in terms of my own profit margins, my own revenue level in order to hit that, right? So I like to plan with the ends in mind. Okay, if I know that I need a 6-month emergency fund and I have this, I need to know like what am I contributing over time in order to get there. If I know that I want my business to be at a certain level, I need to back into like how many new clients or how many things do I need to sell or how many services, like appointments do I need to book, whatever it is to get there. And I think it's a much more useful exercise to focus on the activity and like what is going to take for you to get there versus like the end number, right? Because if we think of just about the end number, then we get discouraged. But right now, as an example, I have a revenue goal, which I know translates to an income goal, which on an activity level is like, how many leads do I need in my business on an ongoing basis to get there? See, I'm not focused on what's that end revenue level. I'm focused on what's the activity that's going to, like, it would be unreasonable for me not to land in that vicinity of that goal if I follow on that. So that's the way I would like to think about it. So for the listeners, it's like, all right, if I know, I want to get to a place where I have a certain asset level, what am I doing over time in order to get there? And what is the weekly, daily, monthly amount? And baking that in first. A lot of us, we spend and we go and do our thing and we live our life, and then it's, I'll save whatever's left over. There's never anything left over. It's like, okay, what do I need to do to hit that year-end number, and make sure that that's the first thing you're doing.
Which is what I too am backing into this year after a tumultuous time of because I myself, yes, do consulting and well, now DEI is the dirty word, even though before I wasn't even calling it DEI, I only started calling it that because that's what everybody was calling it. So I was like, oh, okay, this is how they're gonna find me in the SEO, DEI, right? But like there's all of this other work that I've done, and I realized, okay, this is how I need to shape myself, my services. And now I'm at this precipice where it's like, these are the kind of goals I can make. And I feel very confident in that. And I share that to say, if you are in the space, listener, where you're like, damn, like that sounds like a great idea, but I don't even know what thing I'm counting or whatever, like, then let 2026 be the year where you really work on you. Work on yourself, work on what you need in order to be the person who can show up for the pivots, the learning. And, repetition is the father of learning. Like sometimes you have to do things. I personally am the kind of person who likes to do a lot of sprints and challenges because
Mhm.
having that framework helps me because I do need a level of structure. I have all the heart, but I'm also, if you're into astrology, a Pisces. So I'm in the clouds most of the time. If you don't have something that you tell me ABC, and I'm like, okay, ABC. And along the way, I might not like it. It may challenge me, but to have a trust in the process is the development of it. So it's not always, did I do it perfectly, but like, did I show up for it and track how I was showing up for it so that I can learn what I needed to learn about myself in order to really emerge into the power that I'm looking for. So for me, I'm excited about that for this year is that I've spent all of this year preparing the human. And now the human can honestly say, I'm not scared of figuring out what money looks like. I'm not scared of investing at this level. I am in the bracket of people who like had it and then lost it. And then that has been very painful to be like, I don't have access to what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't see my life without it now. But I look at that hunger as a motivation to be like, well, we're gonna get it back and we're gonna secure it in a very different way for this coming
Love
year.
it.
So Anna, thank you so much for your time
My
today. Thank you for your expertise. Tell us, what do you have coming up? Where can we find you? If we want to sign up and maybe be a client, how do we reach out to you in addition to the awesome free content? Because hello, people, like we have people who are out here giving us resources free, and your Instagram is an example of that. It sounds like you have a newsletter we can sign up for. How can we get into the Poder orbit?
Yes, thank you so much for this conversation. I love having like real money conversations. And one thing about me is I'm gonna push you to do better because I love you. I do it from love. But you can expect a dose of that through our newsletter. You can just go to poderwealth.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Anna N'Jie-Konte. So it's ANNANJIEKONTE on Instagram. I try to post there regularly about business building, about money, but also about kind of what it's like to break some of those cycles and like the mindset behind it. So I like to those are all my jam. You can find me there, and I would just say, I do have some exciting projects coming, but I don't have dates yet. But there's a YouTube coming, so that's really exciting. I'm super excited about that. That should be
Amazing.
Q1.
Amazing. Q1, YouTube, y'all already heard it. Um, I am grateful for again your time, your expertise, and the I feel very infused with confidence and I feel aligned. And I hope that for all of you listening, that you were able to draw a piece of inspiration and motivation that will allow for you to be that six, seven, eight figure, whatever person that you know in your heart you want to be. But most of all, having that be aligned to your true heart and calling and the parts that make you you, because money doesn't make you, you make that money. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. And until next time, bronche.